In 1999, a single American company was worth $258 billion, more than the entire economies of many nations, and over 5 million individual shareholders had staked their futures on it. Walk through the glass doors of the Murray Hill, New Jersey campus on any given morning that year, and you would step into something that felt less like a corporation and more like a civilization unto itself. Rows of physicists and engineers filled laboratories that had birthed the transistor, the laser, and the very operating systems running the computers of the modern world. Corridors hummed, machines pulsed. The air itself seemed electric with the certainty that this place, this company, was the nervous system of the future. At its peak, Lucent Technologies employed 165,000 people across factories, research centers, and offices scattered from New Jersey to India. Its stock price had climbed from $7.56 at its public debut to $84 a share in under 4 years. Analysts called it the greatest corporate story of the decade. Shareholders called it a dream. Workers called it home. Then something went catastrophically wrong. Not in a single dramatic moment, not in one bad quarter or one rogue executive. What happened to Lucent Technologies was slower and more brutal than that. A collapse engineered over years by greed, miscalculation, and a company that believed its own legend so completely it stopped watching the horizon for what was coming. Today, the name is gone. The factories are demolished, the workers are scattered, and the most celebrated research laboratory in American history now flies a Finnish flag. So how does a company with the greatest scientific institution on Earth, over $20 billion in annual revenue, and the goodwill of an entire nation, end up erased from the map? This is the story of the rise, the intoxicating peak, and the catastrophic fall of Lucent Technologies. Welcome inside the Murray Hill factory, where the future was invented and then destroyed. Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. Stories like this one are what we live for, and your support is what makes it all possible. Now, let's go back to the beginning. 1869, Cleveland, Ohio. A small electrical supply business opens its doors in a city still being rebuilt after the Civil War. Its founders have no grand ambitions for world domination. They simply want to make reliable electrical equipment in a country that is hungry for it. That company is Western Electric Manufacturing Company, and almost nobody notices it. But the world is changing faster than anyone can track. In 1876, a Scottish-born inventor named Alexander Graham Bell submits a patent application for an electric telephone in Boston. 2 hours later that same day, a man named Elisha Gray, co-founder of Western Electric, submits his own competing patent. Bell wins by hours. Gray loses the race that would have defined history. But Western Electric does not disappear. It pivots. It survives. And in 1881, Bell's company, which by then has become American Telephone and Telegraph, or AT&T, acquires a controlling interest in Western Electric. From that moment forward, Western Electric becomes the manufacturing engine of the most powerful telecommunications monopoly the world has ever seen. It makes the black rotary telephones that sit on kitchen tables across America. It makes the switches that connect calls from New York to Los Angeles. It makes the copper cable buried in the ground beneath every city. For decades, if a sound travels through a wire in the United States, the equipment making it possible was almost certainly born in a Western Electric factory. In 1925, AT&T formalizes something even more important. It consolidates its engineering and research departments into a single, independently chartered institution, Bell Telephone Laboratories Incorporated. Headquartered initially in New York City, Bell Labs, as it would come to be universally known, is not a standard corporate research division. It is something altogether different. Scientists there are given time, funding, and freedom to pursue ideas that may not bear fruit for decades. It is, by every measure, the most ambitious industrial research enterprise ever created. By the mid-20th century, Bell Labs researchers have invented the transistor, the foundational component of every electronic device that would follow. They develop information theory. They pioneer radar. They invent the solar cell. They conceive the cellular telephone network concept. The groundwork for everything Lucent Technologies would one day become is already being laid. But the company itself does not yet exist. That would require a cataclysm first. January 1st, 1984, Washington, D.C. The United States Department of Justice has spent years building its antitrust case against AT&T, and on this date, the verdict takes effect. The Bell System, the most powerful telecommunications monopoly in American history. A company that has controlled telephone infrastructure in this country for over a century, is legally ordered to dismantle itself. It is one of the largest forced corporate breakups in American history. AT&T is split into 7 regional telephone companies, immediately dubbed the Baby Bells. AT&T itself survives as a long-distance service provider, but Western Electric, the manufacturing arm, and Bell Labs, the research crown jewel, remain with AT&T under a new structure called AT&T Technologies. The consequences of this breakup ripple immediately through the culture of Bell Labs. For decades, the labs had operated with the security of a monopoly's near unlimited budget. Scientists could pursue pure research across timescales of 10 or 20 years because the money was essentially guaranteed. That era ends in 1984. Bell Labs is now tethered to a company fighting for survival in a newly competitive marketplace. Long-term fundamental research gives way, incrementally but inexorably, to shorter development cycles and product-driven priorities. For 12 years, AT&T Technologies wrestles with its identity. It tries to expand into computing, acquiring NCR Corporation in 1991 for over $7 billion, a disastrous move that generates losses and confusion in roughly equal measure. The integration of NCR into AT&T's structure is a slow-motion disaster, producing a division that AT&T internally renames Global Information Solutions, before eventually giving up on the entire venture. By the mid-1990s, AT&T's leadership has reached a conclusion. The company needs to be broken apart again, this time voluntarily, this time strategically. If AT&T's equipment manufacturing division could operate independently, it could sell to AT&T's competitors without the conflict of interest that had been costing it contracts for years. Rival telephone companies had been reluctant to buy switching equipment from the very company competing with them for customers. The solution is separation. The plan is called a trivestiture. 3 companies will emerge from the ruins of the old AT&T structure. One of them will be called Lucent Technologies, and in the spring of 1996, the world will discover just how much pent-up ambition had been trapped inside a corporate bureaucracy for more than a decade. What follows will look, briefly, like a miracle. April 10th, 1996. New York Stock Exchange. The opening bell has barely finished ringing when Lucent Technologies begins its first day of trading as an independent public company. AT&T had sold 17.6% of Lucent to the public through an initial public offering, and that offering raises over $3 billion. It is, at that moment, the largest initial public offering in United States corporate history. The split-adjusted share price enters the market at $7.56. Analysts are cautiously optimistic. A few are openly euphoric. But nobody, not even the most aggressive forecasters, predicts what is about to happen. Henry Schacht, a former chairman of Cummins Engine Company and a 15-year veteran of the AT&T board, is installed as Lucent's first chief executive officer. He is steady, methodical, experienced. His job is to transition a company that has never truly operated on its own into a fully functional independent enterprise. It is a massive operational challenge. Lucent begins its independent life with more than $20 billion in annual revenues and a workforce of 137,000 employees spread across research centers and factories in more than 30 countries. But the more consequential figure in those early days is not Schacht. It is a woman named Carly Fiorina. In 1995, Fiorina had led Lucent's corporate operations while it was still part of AT&T. She plays an instrumental role in designing and executing the IPO strategy that turns the listing into a landmark event. Under her stewardship, the spin-off process is managed with a precision that draws admiration across Wall Street. She is later credited with being a central architect of the offering's success. By the fall of 1996, Lucent is winning equipment contracts from telecommunications carriers that had never dared buy from AT&T. The conflict of interest is eliminated. The business begins to surge. A new ventures group is formed to commercialize Bell Labs' discoveries, channeling scientific breakthroughs into marketable products with an efficiency that the old corporate structure had never permitted. In 1997, Lucent becomes profitable for the first time as a standalone company. Richard McGinn, who had been serving as President and Chief Operating Officer, is promoted to Chief Executive Officer. Schacht steps back to serve as Chairman. McGinn is a lifelong AT&T man, having joined the company directly from college in 1969. He is ambitious, aggressive, and absolutely convinced that Lucent can dominate every corner of the global telecommunications equipment market. He is about to try to prove it. 1998. Murray Hill, New Jersey. Walk the corridors of the Lucent headquarters complex, and you would struggle to find anyone who doubts the company's trajectory. The stock price is climbing. The order books are full. The Bell Labs campus hums with the kind of productive energy that only comes when brilliant people believe they are building something permanent. And the numbers bear it out. From 1996 to 2000, Lucent rises from 12th place to 5th place in the annual ranking of United States patent leaders, surpassed only by IBM, NEC, Canon, and Samsung. In 1999 alone, Bell Labs researchers claim more than 1,000 patents in a single year, the most in the laboratory's history. Under Richard McGinn, the company launches an acquisition campaign of breathtaking scale. In 1998 alone, he executes 11 major acquisitions, 7 of them in data networking alone. Among them, Uri Systems, a provider of broadband networking equipment, absorbed for $1 billion. Prominet Corporation, a gigabit Ethernet pioneer, acquired for $200 million. The German software developer Optime GmbH, purchased for $65 million to strengthen Lucent's position in the European mobile market. In 1997, Lucent acquires Octel Communications Corporation, the leading voicemail company in the United States, for $1.8 billion. The same year, it absorbs Livingston Enterprises for $650 million, instantly acquiring the Radius authentication protocol that the entire dial-up internet industry runs on. Then comes the crown jewel of the acquisition era. In January of 1999, Lucent agrees to purchase Ascend Communications, a California-based manufacturer of networking equipment, for $20 billion. At the time, it is the largest acquisition in telecom equipment history. By 2000, Lucent's market capitalization reaches its summit, $258 billion. 5.3 million individual shareholders own a piece of it, making Lucent the most widely held publicly traded company in America. Not in telecom, not in technology, in all of American commerce. Here is the thing that nobody inside those walls wanted to hear. The acquisitions were not building strength. They were masking fragility. And underneath the dazzling revenue figures, the foundation was cracking in ways that even the most seasoned executives at Murray Hill refused to acknowledge. If you're finding this story fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us continue bringing you these deep dives into history. We are just getting to the part where everything begins to unravel, and you will not want to miss it. 1999, Murray Hill, New Jersey. Richard McGinn stands before investors and analysts with the confidence of a man who has never been wrong. He speaks of audacious goals. He describes stretch targets that he believes will produce results no one else has imagined. He has watched the stock climb from $7 to over $80 a share during his tenure. He has overseen the largest acquisition in his industry's history. He has 14 consecutive quarters of exceeding analyst expectations behind him. The 15th quarter is coming. The problem lurking beneath all of Lucent's glittering performance is not visible on the surface of its financial statements, at least, not yet. The company has been growing revenues in a manner that Fortune magazine would later describe in terms both stark and damning. Money from loans Lucent itself extended to its customers was being recorded as new revenue on its income statement, while the risky debt sat quietly on the balance sheet, dressed up as a solid asset. In a neat piece of financial architecture, the company was essentially selling to itself, lending customers the money to buy its products, then counting those sales as organic growth. Under Carly Fiorina's tenure managing Lucent's largest business divisions, revenues appeared to grow from $19 billion to $38 billion. The company added 22,000 jobs. The stock price grew tenfold. But the underlying engine of that growth was partly built on a customer financing strategy that created the appearance of demand without the reality of it. Meanwhile, the competitive landscape is shifting in ways that McGinn's team is dangerously slow to recognize. Nortel Networks, the Canadian equipment manufacturer, is aggressively moving into optical networking, the technology that will define the next decade of telecommunications infrastructure. In 1999, Nortel's optical networking revenues hit $4 billion. Lucent's optical revenues that same year, $3.6 billion. A gap, but a manageable one. In 2000, Nortel's optical networking revenues explode by 133%, soaring to $9.2 billion. Lucent's optical revenues fall by 7% to $3.3 billion. In the same market, at the same moment, moving in completely opposite directions. Lucent has misread the transition from copper circuits to fiber optics. Its customers are defecting to Nortel. Its strategy is stale. And inside the executive suites at Murray Hill, the response is not alarm. It is denial. January 6, 2000. Murray Hill, New Jersey. Richard McGinn appears before the cameras with what witnesses would later describe as a grim expression, the face of a man delivering news he cannot fully explain. The company has missed its quarterly estimates, not narrowly, significantly. The disruptions in its optical networking business, he explains, have created problems nobody anticipated. Revenues are flat. Profits have collapsed. The market's reaction is instantaneous and brutal. Within hours, Lucent stock plunges 28%. In a single trading day, $64 billion evaporates from the company's market capitalization. Not over a month, not over a quarter, in one day. It is one of the most catastrophic single-day market losses any American company has experienced up to that point in history. But January 6th is only the beginning. What follows over the next several months is a cascade of revelations, each one darker than the last. In November of 2000, Lucent discloses to the Securities and Exchange Commission the existence of a $125 million accounting error from its third quarter. By December, the company reveals it has overstated revenues for its most recent quarter by nearly $700 million. The SEC investigation that follows uncovers something far more systematic than a single error. Federal regulators allege that Lucent fraudulently and improperly recognized approximately $1.1 billion of revenue during fiscal year 2000, a period running from October of 1999 through September of 2000. The violations involve at least 10 distinct transactions. In some cases, revenue is recorded when it cannot legally be recognized. In others, it is booked earlier than the rules permit. Side agreements with distributors, granting them undisclosed rights and concessions, inflate the sales numbers beyond what the transactions actually warrant. 9 current and former executives are eventually charged. The company itself is fined $25 million in 2004 for its lack of cooperation with investigators. Richard McGinn is forced to resign. Henry Schacht returns as interim chief executive. McGinn leaves without selling a single share of Lucent stock during his tenure as CEO, a fact Schacht publicly acknowledges. But the damage McGinn's era has inflicted on the company cannot be measured purely in accounting terms. The culture of audacious goal-setting, of revenue at any cost, of promising Wall Street numbers that required ever more creative construction to deliver, that culture has infected the institution. And it is only January of 2000. 2001. North Andover, Massachusetts. The Merrimack Valley Works sits on 1600 Osgood Street, a manufacturing campus that has been this region's economic spine for decades. At its peak during the 1970s, Western Electric, the predecessor operation on this site, employed 12,000 workers here. In the years leading into the Telecom collapse, the count still hovers near 6,000. Families have built their lives around this place. Children of workers grow up to work here themselves. Grandfathers have retired from these assembly lines. The facility is not a factory. It is a community. Then, on the 1st of April 2001, management announces 725 union job cuts. In July, another 275. In late September, 950 more, executed through what the company calls voluntary packages, but what workers on the floor describe, with bitter precision, as a forced choice between a severance check and the possibility of losing everything with nothing. In 6 months, this single facility loses close to 2,300 union positions. What is happening at Merrimack Valley is happening simultaneously across Lucent's entire manufacturing network. The Columbus Works in Columbus, Ohio, a 1.6 million square foot complex with a history stretching back to Western Electric's arrival in 1959, watches its workforce dwindle from 5,500 in 2000 to skeletal levels within 2 years. The Allentown Works in Allentown, Pennsylvania, once home to over 20,000 workers manufacturing the microelectronics chips that ran the modern world, begins its long slide toward closure and eventual demolition. Factory by factory, city by city, the great manufacturing empire of Western Electric and Bell Labs is being dismantled. By the time the layoffs reach their devastating conclusion, Lucent's workforce has been reduced from 165,000 employees at its peak to just 30,500. That is a reduction of over 80%. More than 130,000 jobs erased from the American economy in under 3 years. We went from being the world's largest telecommunications manufacturer to junk bond status in less than 3 years. One union steward at the Merrimack Valley facility would later testify. But the falling stock price and the vanishing workers are only part of what is being lost. What is truly being lost is irreplaceable. 2001, Murray Hill, New Jersey. The anechoic chamber at the Murray Hill facility was built in 1940. It is the oldest wedge-based anechoic chamber in the world, a room engineered to absorb over 99.9% of all acoustic energy, producing a silence so complete that humans can hear the blood moving through their own ears. At one point, the Guinness Book of World Records certifies it as the quietest room on Earth. It is a monument to the kind of extreme, patient, long-horizon science that Bell Labs embodies. In the decades before the Lucent era, Bell Labs was an institution of almost incomprehensible scientific output. Its researchers invented the transistor in 1947, the device without which there are no computers, no smartphones, no internet as we know it. They developed information theory, the mathematical framework that makes all digital communication possible. They created the Unix operating system, which underlies nearly every major computing platform operating today. They built the first functional laser. They discovered the cosmic microwave background radiation, evidence of the Big Bang itself, and won a Nobel Prize for it. 11 Nobel Prizes in physics have been awarded to Bell Labs researchers over the institution's history. Now, in 2001, the budget cuts are arriving. The workforce reductions that are gutting Lucent's manufacturing base are reaching into the research laboratories as well. Bell Labs' India operations, both the Bangalore and Hyderabad facilities, are closed in August of 2001. The Hilversum facility in the Netherlands, a research and development centre, announces closure the following year. $250 million from the New Ventures Group, the engine that turned Bell Labs discoveries into commercial products, is sold to Collar Capital, a London-based private equity firm, as Lucent struggles to raise cash. The deeper damage is harder to quantify. As experienced researchers and scientists are let go by the hundreds, people whose expertise took decades to build, that institutional knowledge does not simply retire. It disperses. It goes to competitors, to universities, to startups, or it simply disappears. The scientific journal Nature would later report that by mid-2008, just 4 scientists remained in the entire physics research division at Bell Labs. 4 physicists. In the world's most celebrated industrial research laboratory, the silence in that anechoic chamber is nothing compared to what is coming. January 7, 2002, Murray Hill, New Jersey. She has been here before. Patricia Russo spent 2 decades climbing through the ranks of AT&T and then Lucent, rising eventually to Executive Vice President of the corporate office, before leaving in 2001 to join Eastman Kodak as its Chief Operating Officer. Now, barely a year after her departure, she is brought back. At 49 years old, Russo is named Permanent Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Lucent Technologies, becoming the company's first female chief executive and only its 3rd CEO in its brief independent history. By the time she takes the helm, more than 60,000 employees have already been laid off. The stock is trading below $7 per share compared to its $84 peak. The SEC investigation is active. The quarterly losses for 2 consecutive periods in fiscal 2001 exceed $3 billion each. She inherits a burning building and is handed a garden hose. Russo's strategy is methodical where McGinn's had been reckless. She focuses on cost reduction with relentless discipline. She works to stabilize core product lines, telephone switching equipment, optical networking, wireless infrastructure, rather than chasing acquisitions. She speaks honestly about the scale of the challenges in a way that her predecessors never did. But the problems are structural, not merely operational. Lucent's decision in 2000 to spin off its enterprise networking division as Avaya and then its microelectronics division as Agere Systems in 2002 removes precisely the business units that would prove most vital for future growth. The company is trimming what it believes is fat, but what it is actually removing is muscle. Meanwhile, merger talks with Alcatel, the French telecommunications company, collapse in December of 2001 when the 2 sides cannot agree on board representation. Lucent's Henry Schacht demands an equal 7-7 board split. Alcatel's chief executive Serge Churuk insists on 8 seats, reflecting his company's stronger position. The negotiations fail. Lucent's share price collapses further on the news. By October of 2002, the stock price hits its nadir, 55 cents per share. A company once valued at $258 billion is now worth, in the open market, roughly the price of a soft drink. We're halfway through this incredible story. If you're enjoying it, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support means everything. And the final chapters of Lucent's story, the desperate mergers, the demolitions, and what the world lost, are coming up right now. 2002. New Jersey and Ohio. When a company cannot generate enough revenue to cover its costs, the options narrow quickly. You cut people. Then you sell assets. Then you sell the assets you thought you would never sell. By 2002, Lucent is deep into the third category. In April of 2000, the company had already sold its consumer products division, the business that made the telephones sitting in homes across America, to VTech, the Hong Kong electronics manufacturer. The transition is swift and largely unnoticed by the public, but it signals something important. Lucent is no longer in the business of making products that ordinary people touch. The optical fiber business, an operation that traces its lineage to some of the most important materials research in Bell Labs history, is sold in 2001 to Furukawa Electric Company of Japan for $2.525 billion. Corning Incorporated simultaneously pays Lucent $225 million for its fiber optic cable operations in China. In August of 2001, Lucent enters a 5-year supply agreement with Celestica, a Canadian contract electronics manufacturer, handing over manufacturing assets in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and Columbus, Ohio, in exchange for $570 million in cash. The factories that Western Electric workers had built and staffed for decades are transferred to a company that has no relationship with the communities around them. What Lucent is doing is called asset divestiture. What it feels like, inside the communities affected, is amputation without anesthesia. The Richmond Works facility in Richmond, Virginia, once cited by Fortune magazine in 1979 as one of the 10 best-managed American factories, has already been sold to Via Systems Group, which closes the circuit board plant in 2001. The Indianapolis Works facility, once employing thousands of workers assembling consumer telephone sets, is closed and sold. The Kansas City Works in Lee's Summit, Missouri, 1.5 million square feet of manufacturing space, is shuttered. By 2003, Lucent's market value has fallen to $15.6 billion. Its stock trades around $2.13. The company is still alive, barely. But the machine that built it, the vast manufacturing network, the factory towns, the working families, is gone. What remains is a smaller, frailer company trying to find a reason to exist. May 2004. Newark, New Jersey. The Securities and Exchange Commission files its formal civil complaint in federal court in the District of New Jersey. The document is long and specific and damning. The SEC alleges that Lucent Technologies fraudulently and improperly recognized approximately $1.1 billion of revenue and $470 million in pre-tax income during fiscal year 2000. At minimum, 10 separate transactions are implicated. The violations are systematic, not incidental. Among those charged are 9 current and former Lucent executives. Their names fill a legal record that will define the company's legacy as much as any patent or product ever could. Alice Leslie Dawn, former Vice President of Indirect Sales for North America, is accused of entering side agreements with distributors, agreements granting those distributors rights and privileges beyond those in their official contracts. Those hidden side agreements made it legally improper to recognize the associated revenue. But Lucent recognized it anyway. J. William Carter, former president of the AT&T Customer Business Unit, is accused of authorizing a side agreement connected to a $53 million sales transaction with AT&T Wireless Services in fiscal 2000. Again, recognizing that revenue was improper. Again, Lucent did it. In the Bell South transaction, former Vice President of Sales, John Bratton, is accused of structuring a $95 million software pooling agreement and adding a $20 million credit and a price discount to induce Bell South to sign, then booking the entire $95 million as revenue and operating income in a single quarter. Lucent pays the $25 million fine without admitting or denying wrongdoing. It consents to a permanent injunction against future violations of the securities laws. Patricia Russo, in her statement on the settlement, notes that the company self-reported the revenue recognition issues as soon as it discovered them in the fall of 2000. That is technically accurate, but by the time the world learned the truth, the stock had already plummeted. Hundreds of thousands of shareholders, including thousands of Lucent's own retired workers who had invested their pension savings in company stock, had already suffered losses they would never recover. The class action securities fraud lawsuit filed on behalf of purchasers between October of 1999 and December of 2000 is eventually settled. Restitution is made, but no settlement restores what those people lost. The money is gone. The trust is gone. April 2nd, 2006. Murray Hill, New Jersey, and Paris, France. The announcement comes simultaneously on two continents. Lucent Technologies and Alcatel, the French telecommunications giant that is 1.5 times Lucent's size, have agreed to merge. The deal is structured as an acquisition, though both sides use the language of partnership. The combined entity will be called Alcatel-Lucent. Patricia Russo will serve as the new company's chief executive officer. Alcatel's Serge Churuk, the same man whose insistence on extra board seats had killed the 2001 merger talks, will become non-executive chairman. On the 1st of December 2006, the transaction closes. Lucent Technologies Incorporated, the company that was born on September 30, 1996, as the largest corporate spin-off in American history, ceases to exist as an independent entity. It has been alive as an autonomous company for just over 10 years. The merger is supposed to create synergies. It is supposed to generate the global scale necessary to compete with Ericsson, Nokia, and the emerging Chinese telecommunications manufacturers. It is supposed to save what remains of Bell Labs by pairing it with Alcatel's own research division into a single, powerful innovation engine. None of that happens. Not even approximately. The integration is plagued by cultural friction between French and American management styles, by the enormous complexity of combining two sprawling global organizations, and by the continued deterioration of the underlying telecommunications equipment market. The expected synergies fail to materialize. Significant write-downs of Lucent assets follow. At the end of 2008, both Russo and Churuk are forced to resign. The Alcatel-Lucent combination limps through the next several years, posting losses, restructuring, shedding more employees. The Naperville, Illinois Bell Labs campus, a 600,000 square foot glass complex commissioned in 2000, built at enormous expense, designed to accommodate 2,000 researchers, sells in April of 2023 for $4.8 million. A building that cost tens of millions to construct sells for the price of a modest suburban home in the city it sits beside. The buyer announces plans to demolish it. What was built in decades of accumulated scientific ambition is reduced to rubble in months. April 15, 2015, Helsinki, Finland. Nokia, the Finnish telecommunications company, famous in the 1990s for its mobile phones, and since diminished by the smartphone revolution, announces its intent to purchase Alcatel-Lucent for €15.6 billion in an all-stock deal. The stated rationale is strategic. Nokia needs Alcatel-Lucent's network infrastructure business and its deep penetration in the United States market. Alcatel-Lucent needs Nokia's financial stability and global reach, and both companies need to remain competitive against Ericsson and the rapidly expanding Chinese manufacturer Huawei. On the 3rd of November 2016, the transaction is finalized. Nokia completes the acquisition, retires the Alcatel-Lucent brand name, and merges the combined operation into its Nokia Networks division. Bell Telephone Laboratories, the institution that invented the transistor, the laser, the Unix operating system, and a dozen other technologies that define the modern world, is now a subsidiary of a Finnish corporation. The Bell Labs name survives. Nokia makes a public commitment to maintain it as an independent research institution operating under the Nokia umbrella. And to Nokia's credit, the laboratory continues to function, working on artificial intelligence, 6G wireless research, and advanced materials science. But the independence, the culture of pure long-horizon research, the capacity to pursue ideas that may not produce commercial results for 20 years, that is a different matter entirely. The Murray Hill campus in New Providence, New Jersey, still stands. It is now a Nokia office. The cricket field on the grounds, a quirk of the campus that charmed visitors for decades, remains. The anechoic chamber, built in 1940, still absorbs sound with preternatural efficiency. But the workforce that once populated those halls is gone, reduced from tens of thousands to a fraction. The factories that supplied the campus, in Columbus, in Allentown, in North Andover, in Indianapolis, are demolished or repurposed, or simply abandoned. Meanwhile, in Washington, legislators and national security officials have begun to ask a question that nobody thought to ask in the 1990s. What does it mean that America's most important telecommunications research laboratory is now under the control of a foreign company? It is a valid question, and it arrives, as most important questions do, a generation too late. The empire is already gone. Return for a moment to Murray Hill. The campus exists. The buildings stand. The address? The same Murray Hill, New Jersey address that was once the most prestigious in all of American telecommunications, still appears on official correspondence. If you were to visit today, you would find a Nokia facility. Functional, professional, occupied. But walk those corridors imagining what once moved through them. The Nobel laureates, the engineers designing the infrastructure of the internet age, the factory workers whose fathers and grandfathers had built this institution before them, and the quiet becomes something heavier than quiet. Here, then, is what the story of Lucent Technologies teaches. The first lesson is the danger of confusing scale with strength. At its peak, Lucent was the most widely held company in America. 5.3 million shareholders, $258 billion in market capitalization, 165,000 employees on 6 continents. But scale is not strength. Scale built on customer financing schemes, on revenue that must be recognized before it is earned, on quarterly targets that require creative accounting to reach. That is a house of cards dressed as a fortress. Lucent was enormous, and it was brittle. The two things coexisted for years, until they collided on January 6, 2000. The second lesson is that innovation without strategy is not enough to survive. Bell Labs produced 11 Nobel Prize laureates. It held more patents per year than almost any other organization on Earth. In 2000, it ranked 5th among all American companies in annual patent generation, surpassed only by IBM and 3 Asian manufacturers. That intellectual firepower was real. But Lucent failed to translate it into market leadership precisely where the market was moving fastest. When optical networking demand exploded, Nortel captured that market. Lucent, despite holding enormous expertise in the field, missed the transition because its leadership was focused on hitting quarterly numbers rather than building for the next decade. The third lesson is that the human cost of corporate failure is not abstract. The Merrimack Valley Works employed 12,000 people at its peak. The Allentown Works employed 20,000. The Columbus Works employed over 12,000 during Western Electric's prime years. These were not interchangeable positions. They were careers, identities, communities. Workers who spent 35 years on these factory floors did not simply find comparable employment when the facilities closed. Many were in their 50s, with specialized skills the broader market did not value. Their losses were permanent. What remains of Lucent Technologies is a name on a Nokia campus, a research division that has survived under foreign stewardship, and a cautionary archive of what happens when a company believes its own mythology too completely. From its IPO in 1996 to its disappearance in 2006, 10 years. From $258 billion to 55 cents a share. From 165,000 workers to 30,500. The light-bearing company, the one named for illumination, consumed by the very darkness it promised to dispel.